Good morning, Sam.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Advisory Commission on Governmental Relations for our December 1st, 2023 meeting. I am John Filchak, the Vice Chair. I'll be chairing the meeting today in the absence of Brendan Sharkey, our Chair, who's not able to attend today. We don't yet have a quorum. We're just a couple of members short, but as has been our practice of late, we'll begin with the work, and hopefully we get a quorum shortly, and then we can go back and take whatever actions are appropriate. And just before we move forward, just let everyone that is present introduce themselves that are here in person and online. We'll start with the folks inside. Martin.
Sure. Martin Heft, Office of Policy and Management Undersecretary.
Matt Hart, Executive Director, Capital Region Council of Governments.
And I can't see who's online, but do you have
Sam Gold, Executive Director of RiverCog.
Morning, Sam.
Good morning, morning, John, and good morning, everyone. Jim O'Leary. I'm the representative of the Senate Minority Leader, Kevin Kelly.
I'll go next. Good morning. My name is Troy Rakuya. I'm the Director of Collective Bargaining for AFSCME Council 4.
Parliamental. I'm the Executive Director at South Central Regional Council of Governments.
Betsy Guerra, Executive Director of the Connecticut Council of Small Towns.
Katie Stargarter from DECD.
Maureen Brummett, Superintendent of Newington Public Schools, representing CAPS.
We have anyone else? Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you. As I say, when we get a quorum, we'll go back to our previous meeting minutes and all of that. And I guess that would go for setting up our meeting schedules for 2024 as well, because we'll have to take an action on that. How about membership updates? Where are we at with that, Martin?
I can give you one that we did receive correspondence in today that was sent over from Deep Commissioner Katie Dykes, just letting us know that she has appointed Ethan Van Ness, Senior Advisor on Intergovernmental Affairs in the Office of the Commissioner, as her designee on ACIR. Ethan will replace Harrison Nance, who was the prior designee. And then I know on the agenda has a couple that are waiting approval, and we know we have some current vacancies upcoming, obviously due to the November elections.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll go to item 5, which is continue our discussion on Special Act 2313, an act studying the consolidation of metropolitan planning organizations, and emphasize the word study. We did receive a memo from 4 of the MPO directors, and today also another memorandum from the Council of Small Towns. And I'll just ask one of the authors, I don't know if Matt or Sam or Carl, one of you guys wants to just go through what you provided, and then we can open up the discussion of the subject.
Sure. If I can go over it. Just give me 1 second to bring it up. Yeah, from the agenda. Just 1 second. But I also just want to thank Bruce Witchin, our very capable staff member to ACIR, for his very good minutes of the meeting in November. I think his minutes and our memo from the MPO directors were paralleled each other pretty nicely. So, all right. So I'm bringing up the memo from that we submitted to ACR membership and to the chair and vice chair, and we organized it based on the questions in the Special Act 23-13, and sort of summarize some of the important things that we heard and some of our recommendations from what we heard. For the first question, recommend a minimum population to be represented by an MPO. It was pretty clear that we heard from our federal partners at the Federal Highway Administration and some of our other speakers that 23 U.S. Code Section 134 sets the minimum size of an MPO at 50,000 persons, and that Connecticut does not have the ability to change that minimum size. Of course, our MPOs are all larger than 50,000 people, but the state can't mandate a higher minimum than what already exists in the federal law. So our recommendation is to maintain consistency with the U.S. Code in that regard. For number 2, we just reflected upon what we heard from Federal Highway Administration and also from the Connecticut DOT regarding the partnership that's required to consolidate MPOs, and it's a partnership between the chief elected officials, the municipalities, and the governor, and how that partnership of those two parties is essential to see consolidations. And if you're going to be successful in that partnership, to have consolidations, there needs to be a compelling reason for a different configuration or reorganization. And we haven't yet seen very much of a compelling argument by the speakers that we saw or articulated as part of this legislation that would be convincing to our MPO CEOs. And so And I think it was also clear that the reconfigurations or mergers are very time intensive and take a lot of work and money to be able to effectuate, and that right now with the wealth of federal discretionary funds, that might be counterproductive. Actually, I'm joining you today from the U.S. Department of Transportation in Washington, and the Secretary of Transportation just told us about the $1 trillion that they need to get out the door in the next 18 months. So there's a lot of money coming from Washington, and we need to be all engaged on making sure that we're competitive. I think under 3, identify the potential consistencies and efficiencies for consolidation. We heard from the federal U.S. Department of Transportation, FHWA, about their quadrennial recertifications of MPOs and how they review MPOs for consistency with federal law, and they have the power to direct MPOs to rectify any inconsistencies. And but we are not aware of any MPOs that are right now inconsistent with federal law. We also didn't identify any clear efficiencies or benefits that would result from the consolidation of MPOs. There was some discussion about the value of coordination between MPOs and some good examples that were presented from Florida. But actual consolidation of MPOs is pretty uncommon. Let's see. There was discussion from the governor's office about their interest in MPO consolidation in regard to assisting with the state's climate change pollution goals for carbon reduction, but there wasn't a lot fleshed out as to how MPO consolidation and Connecticut's carbon initiative would actually help each other. We also reported as well in the minutes that Connecticut DOT currently does the air quality modeling, and they would also do the modeling for carbon emissions for the entire state. And they were not, although they were seeing some benefit if the MPOs had more funding, and that funding would come from being larger or having a larger share of the funds in one agency. They were not looking to devolve those responsibilities to the MPOs. And the RiverCog's chair also pointed out how the local transportation capital improvement program, which has been in existence for about 10 years, allows for a swap of federal money for state money with the MPOs. So the state money is programmed by the MPOs on state priorities and state projects. So that partnership between the MPOs and the state DOT allows for statewide coordination of federal investments. And so whether you have one MPO or 8 or 9 MPOs, the federal money that's coming in through the MPOs would still be programmed on state priorities and state assets. And we also heard from the Association MPOs about the variety of different forms of MPOs across the country, and how in Connecticut the type of structure of our MPOs being hosted by COGS is more like the all-in-one organization, and that is becoming more popular as a type of host for MPOs. And it was observed that having MPOs hosted by COGS, it contributes to a more holistic approach to planning, combining the disciplines of transportation, land use, economic development, housing, environmental, and community planning. Let's see, identify any barriers that the state or municipalities may encounter while planning or during the consolidation of MPOs. Well, we learned of three MPO mergers as part of our special meeting. One in Virginia in the Hampton Roads region in the 1980s, RiverCog's merger in 2014, and the Rio Grande Valley MPO in Texas in 2019. So in the history of MPOs, which is about 50 years long, those are the three that were identified. So they were quite rare. And the scholar we had from the University of South Florida identified one of the big barriers is that local governments generally do not want to relinquish power or their votes. And so without that desire to potentially relinquish power, redesignation doesn't occur. So and the RiverCog MPO chair emphasized that it's essential to start with the chief elected officials to build trust and cooperation in order to successfully realize an MPO merger, and that bottom-up process was what made the RiverCog MPO merger possible. The chair observed that RiverCog CEOs saw it in the municipality's interest to merge their respective MPOs, and that is, I think, key here, is that a case needs to be made to CEOs as to why a merger would be beneficial to them, and then you can get the votes necessary. As for 5, identifying state resources that can assist municipalities to overcome any such barriers. No state resources were identified, although Federal Highway Administration and the Association of MPOs identified themselves as technical resources for MPOs. And the national experts spoke to the continuing cooperative and comprehensive 3C planning process that the federal government, state, and MPOs engage in collectively, and how that is, an assistance for anything that the MPOs would like to do, and could be useful in overcoming barriers, but not specifically on this barrier of mergers. And number 6, include transition planning to address the staffing and funding needs of MPOs. The Federal Highway Administration again said that they have resources that could assist MPOs, including for organization operations, and AMPO as well can be helpful in this regard. And so did the national scholar from the University of South Florida. RiverCog's MPO chair identified the uncertainty created by consolidation as undermining staff retention, and highlighted the issue that all the COGs and MPOs have vacant positions that are hiring for, and it's a difficult hiring market at the moment. And Connecticut DOT, the deputy commissioner, identified a shortage of staff that DOT is facing with 200 engineer positions, and that the issue of keeping and getting new staff is a real one. And then number 7 was identifying conclusions that can be drawn from the configuration of metropolitan planning organizations in other states. The Association of MPOs reported that Connecticut is performing better on average on a per capita basis on almost all federal transportation funding programs, and that the state's highway system ranks one of the best in the country, number 5. So they did report that Connecticut on a national level is doing quite well. And they also although jokingly said this, I think it's important. Both the director of AMPO and the MPO scholar stated that if you've seen one MPO, you've seen one MPO, and that the over 400 MPOs across the country vary in size, configuration, operations, even though they all follow the same federal laws and they're held to the same standards. That federal law ensures consistency and efficiency, but it also allows the local governments that are served by the MPOs to influence, to decide the institutional arrangements, regional priorities, and really focus their efforts on what's important to that region. Other, I think, important findings from outside Connecticut is MPOs in Connecticut are average to above average with respect to population as compared to MPOs nationwide. The MPO scholar presented statistics on board size and staffing, and by those metrics, MPOs in Connecticut are consistent with the rest of the nation. The MPO scholar noted that very large MPOs are uncommon, but when you're doing an average, they can skew the statistics. When the Federal Highway Administration stated that they don't take a position on the size of individual MPOs beyond what's stated in federal law, and that there was a discussion about federal law allows for more than one MPO per urbanized area when the local governments and governors agree to it, which has been the case in Connecticut. What the NPO scholar also noted, and some of us receive emails from Mary Beth Wojcinski at Connecticut DOT, is the urbanized areas change with every census. So we just signed off on the 2020 urbanized areas, which actually removed one urbanized area from River Cog's MPO, for example. So as those urbanized areas change, you know, the exact, you know, transportation management areas that you might be involved in, or those cooperation, you know, technically change, but you can't go through an organizational change every time the urbanized area changes, because they've changed quite dramatically over the years, and sometimes back and forth in ways that don't necessarily make a great amount of sense. Nevertheless, I think we learned from the Florida example how multiple MPOs along a corridor, such as I-95 in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm area, work together and coordinate along that corridor for coordination purposes, and how that coordination has worked very well and has endured over many years. And I think there's some examples elsewhere in Florida, but also elsewhere in the country, where you know, we could potentially learn something. Although I think I pointed out that many of the MPOs in Connecticut do engage in the coordination and cooperation together already. And I think one thing that's one cooperation is the MAP Forum, which is having their annual meeting actually right now, which is the greater New York metro area cooperation of MPOs. And then just to sum up other recommendations and observations, we have MPOs to review the references provided by the national experts and identify best practices that can be implemented locally to support coordination among MPOs in Connecticut, but also MPOs in neighboring states. There was a little discussion about bi-state MPOs. For example, part of the Worcester urbanized area comes into Connecticut, and whether there's options for Northeast Connecticut COG to work more closely or become a member of that MPO. So there was a discussion about bi-state MPOs, and working across state lines is something that's quite common in the MPO world. We also observed that there are successes from other states that we can learn from, but at the same time, I think there's successes from Connecticut that we can share nationally. I think the LOTSIP program is something which the Association of MPOs is very interested in educating the rest of the country about, because I think that's innovation that's allowed Connecticut to really excel in spending federal money, but also maintaining and improving its transportation network. We also mentioned the lean process that DOT started with the MPOs the last 2 summers ago, and how we've had very positive outcomes and really improving our relationship with the DOT and communicating, I think, better than we've ever communicated. And we also, as many of you know, the MPOs and the COGs meet regularly with OPM. We have meetings with DEEP and other state and national entities to coordinate on various different projects. We're all working together on the EPA climate pollution control grants, and that type of forums and cooperation seems to be consistent with best practices across the country. Let's see, 2 other items is that we through that special meeting, we learned there's a strong network of government, nonprofit, and academic experts who can assist MPOs, and MPOs, if they're not already doing so, should take advantage of these resources. And I think the final thing is that Connecticut's MPOs have been very successful in receiving federal transportation funds under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. However, this does not mean that we can't do even better. The state, the regions, and municipalities should review ACR's recommendations to improve access to federal funds In particular, we would see a recommendation from ACIR to the state that we establish an infrastructure bank similar to Rhode Island to assist municipalities and the COGs and MPOs with funding the non-federal match required by many federal infrastructure grant programs. As I mentioned earlier, I'm here at USDOT, and they have an unprecedented amount of money through the IIJA that they need to push out. And many of those programs require match. And as we know, that is a struggle for towns and cities who don't keep excess unbudgeted funds on their budgets in case of a discretionary grant from Washington. So that's something I think that ACR can be very helpful with. But so that's my summary of the memo. We do have Matt Hart and Carl Mento here as well. I don't know if they want to highlight anything that I might have missed, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. Appreciate your effort and the other and Matt and Carl and Francis's effort in putting this together. There's a lot of good information in here, and I think will be really helpful for our report. Any questions, comments from members? Matt?
I think Sam provided a very thorough review of our memo. You know, one point I might want to emphasize just a little bit more. You know, if we're looking at this issue from the perspective of trying to utilize resources more efficiently, and in addition, approaching it from a more comprehensive planning perspective, you know, we do have two very good things going for us here in Connecticut. Number one, as our memo mentions, and as Sam highlighted, each of the 8 MPOs that serve our state are presently co-hosted or hosted by a council of governments. So that does allow us to utilize resources arguably more efficiently and effectively. Another benefit of having a COG closely associated with an MPO is that you're able to combine various planning disciplines. In addition to transportation planning, which is the primary focus of an MPO, when you're working with a COG, you have land use planners, regional planners, environmental planners, folks with expertise on housing, transit-oriented development, and a number of related disciplines, which, you know, can create a more comprehensive organization as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And I think all very solid points. And we also received earlier today a memo from Council of Small Towns, and I believe Betsy's here, aren't you, Betsy?
Yes, I am. I believe Sam has his hand up, though, so I didn't want to interrupt his opportunity.
If you want to take a couple of minutes, please, and just share with us the main points of on this, since it's specific to this study.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the opportunity to submit the comments and the opportunity to talk more fully about them this morning. Back in 2013, when the legislature directed a study of issues relating to the consolidation of the metropolitan planning organizations, they did so in conjunction with the Moore Commission. And at the time, we had several municipal leaders representing small towns who are very engaged in the process, recognizing how the consolidation could impact transportation planning processes in our small rural and suburban towns. And that was a good thing. And I think as a result, we were able to come to agreement on some of the issues relative to configuring the MPOs and the councils of government. Unfortunately, at this point, the legislature has directed the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations to study the issue again. And we do not have a full complement of cost representatives on ACER, although we have been trying for almost a year, at least, if not over a year, to have those appointments made. We have people willing to serve in that capacity. And we're concerned that the study will be finalized before we actually have an opportunity to have the input from members serving on ACER representing small towns. Just to summarize some of the points in the memo, we do have concerns that this would fundamentally change the process. We feel that the MPO process, which is currently consensus driven, is working well. Our small towns feel that they have a strong voice in the process, and we believe that consolidation into larger planning regions may end up undermining the voice of our small towns and really having a negative impact on transportation planning processes in those communities. So at this point, we again have concerns with the consolidation. We agree with the points that were made in the memo distributed by the MPO representatives that Sam just summarized. I think they laid out very well some of the issues related to consolidation that the ACER needs to consider in moving forward with this study. And we're happy to become more engaged in this process. I know our president, Tony Salvatore, was able to speak at the November 14th meeting, and I think that's a good thing, but it may be helpful to have small town representatives from other areas as well address the commission on how this may impact their communities and transportation planning. And I do say that, I know Matt mentioned the fact that this is currently a holistic process, and I agree that increasingly we're finding that you have to have an opportunity for the land use, environmental, housing, and other areas represented when you're talking about transportation planning processes. And the MPOs, the current structure of the MPOs, is able to do that very well and very nimbly. And I'm concerned that a larger planning region under a consolidated MPO, I think that would be lost. So again, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Betsy. And we have a lot of information that was we received during our last meeting. In particular, I found incredible, very, very useful the information provided by the gentleman from Florida. I thought he was a wealth of information, and now we have the memo from the MPOs, what Cost has provided us, and we have other documents that were distributed from the public hearing during the putting together of this special act. So there's a good amount of information that we have, and you mentioned the Moore Commission. There's also the Transportation Strategy Board that weighed in on this subject as well. There's a lot of information and resources that we can attach to whatever our report is. I think some of the stuff that's being asked for us are quite simple, that it's federal law, and there's really not a place for, Connecticut doesn't have the ability to override it. I guess what I'm going to suggest is that we get 3 or 4 folks, if they're willing to volunteer, to put together a draft report for action for our January meeting, to try to meet that deadline. I don't disagree with what Betsy was just saying, that having additional input would make this a much better study in terms of value to the General Assembly and the governor. But we do have the deadline that we are up against. Not that deadlines are always hard and fast on this type of study, but I don't know what people think about that of going forward. I don't think we're going to be able to decide anything here today.
If I may, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did discuss last month at our special meeting potentially having the chair call another special meeting before the end of the year, so we can weigh in and approve that document before the end of the year, or at least have a more of a working meeting on this report. And I would volunteer to serve on that subcommittee if it pleases the chair and vice chair.
Well, we always appreciate volunteers, Sam, and I think a subcommittee of this group meeting before the end of the year on this would be valuable. I don't see really the value in having everyone meet, but if that's the desire, then I'm happy to do that.
And I just wanted, and there's one other item I just wanted to mention, just to echo something that was said earlier, if that's okay. I'm sitting out. I'm currently at the USDOT, and they're talking about housing right now, and I'm sitting out of that meeting to attend the ACIR meeting. But the fact that that our MPOs are hosted by COGS, who are getting very engaged in housing planning, puts us so far ahead than our colleagues in other states where you have single purpose MPO organizations. So, you know, I'm missing a session right now in housing, but I don't feel like I'm missing much, because this is about remedial discussions for MPOs who haven't gotten involved in housing planning. So I think that in this, you know, atmosphere, in this current, situation with the federal government, I think puts us in a very advantageous position. So I just wanted to echo my colleagues, Matt and Betsy's comments. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Point made. Matt?
Yes, I would also volunteer to serve on a voluntary committee to draft a report for the full commission's consideration. Assuming the full commission will need to endorse it, and I don't know if it will be a challenge to get the commission together this month, would there be the possibility of requesting a short extension and having the full commission vote at our meeting in January? Would that be an option?
I think that's going to be. I think it's quite appropriate. And we'll make the necessary communications to the committee and the governor that we need to finish our work. And given that it is a short legislative session and they won't be until February, I think we have that somewhat the element of time. I think the more important to get the quality than the timeline. And as I said, we won't necessarily be the first study to miss its time date. I'm afraid. So we'll put together for those and anyone who wishes to attend, we'll put together a special. It'll be by Zoom, but a meeting to craft a draft and hopefully have something for our regular January meeting for the full body to consider and get it out in advance so that everyone has time to review it. Sound good? All right. Thank you. Mark.
Mr. Chairman, it's Jim. Would it be appropriate to have the Council of Small Towns, have Betsy recommend someone to be a volunteer on that group also?
You know, the Council of Small Towns is a member of this group, and it's been our practice with these with the subcommittees to anyone who wishes to provide input. We've been open to that, so I don't see where that's inappropriate at all, and if it would welcome it myself.
Good, thank you.
Martin?
Thanks. And thanks, Betsy and Sam and, the others that have all, done the presentations today. I think it's really, it's good. There's a lot of good information. We've had a lot of great presentations that have been done. And I wanted to just make, a couple of just points, and I'm more than happy to work with, Matt and Sam in developing, a kind of a report, on this, because I think, looking at this, we don't have to have it be, this big, huge, lengthy report, because we have some wonderful presentations with great information in them to be able to just answer the questions. One thing I do want to note, and, I know our vice chair mentioned at the beginning of this, is for everyone to remember as we're putting this together that, our charge is to study the consolidation, even though we know there's one listed in there as number 2 is to recommend any consolidation areas. This is not a consolidation plan. This is a study about the consolidations kind of, and I look at it as a report kind of going through listing, possibly some pros, cons underneath of it for that. But the other thing I wanted to mention, just so, and, I believe we should include this in the report, is that there is already an established process for reviewing our planning area regions, which is under section 16A-4C, the redesignation of planning regions by the secretary, which I know Betsy, alluded to a little bit earlier on that. And there's, this is supposed to happen every 20 years. As was noted, this was done in 2014. The reports are out there and I believe have been circulated from that. So I think it's good for us to highlight as ACIR that there is already an established process for reviewing planning area regions, which could then look at other things. But one of the items in that, and I want to just read 2 things quickly from that legislation, is on or before January 1st and at least 20 years thereafter, OPM secretary, in consultation with regional planning organizations, CCM, cost, commissioner transportation, chairs of ranking members of the joint committees regarding planning and development, shall conduct an analysis of boundaries of logical planning regions. And then it goes on. An analysis should include, but not limited to, the evaluation. And there's about 10 or so items listed there. But number 8 is transportation corridors, connectivity and boundaries, including the boundaries of metropolitan planning agencies, as we've all been talking about here, and everything else. So I think including that there is already provisions for looking at this every 20 years is important for us to just highlight in this whole process as we go forward. So I'd like to see, at least make sure we mention that through our final, report out there.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for your comments today on this. And so, as I said, we'll put together a meeting and get that out to you all. So let's move on to item number 6, work for 2024. And first one is the full mandate compendium. Bruce, do you want to make any comment on that?
I'll just say that I have a rough, I'll call it a rough draft, not a first draft, because I'm still waiting for the Public Act to statute conversion tables that will be out within a few weeks, and the updated section names that I'll want to update. Christine and Martin are looking at some text at the beginning, the cover letter, the summary. Hopefully within a few days, I'll circulate it to members. It's due mid-February, so it could potentially be reviewed by members in January, and the thing be ready to go to the legislature a little early in 2024.
Great, thank you. Okay, so our next for a couple of topics for consideration for 2024. The first is to update the report that ACIR did to the task force to promote municipal shared services. Many of you were involved in that. Some of you are new to it, but that was a significant effort on the part of ACIR to assist a special task force of the legislature. And, in that report, we did I think a really good job of outlining the sort of the playing field for as it stood in 2020 for municipal and shared services, and then made in six major categories a series of recommendations for change, and then another 30 some odd additional recommendations. The reason this is here today is I think that's still a very valid and important document, and is to perhaps during 2024, as part of our work, is to update that report, because many things have happened since that time. Some of the recommendations have been acted on, others not, but to brush it off and bring it up to date, and just wanted to see what people's thoughts were on doing that. Any comments? Martin?
So thanks, John, for that. Actually, I think that's a great idea. I know that I use this report a lot when I go back looking at, potential legislation, looking at changes, looking at, shared services, as we're looking at a review of legislation or looking at different programs. I've gone back to this and have actually used this as reference coming in, as saying, well, here's the ACIR study report that was done that supports this concept. So, and as you said, we've actually, I know we have utilized certain pieces out of here already, and some of those have been done. So it'd be great to kind of see an update, looking at that, see which things have been done, or which things, be like, okay, it's no longer valid, or it still is and may just need some updates. So I think that would be a good thing for us to look at in the upcoming year.
Other comments? Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would concur with my colleague, Mr. Heft. I also see this as a very beneficial exercise and important focus for the commission for next year. The issue of shared services remains very important to my organization, the Capital Region Council of Governments. It's likely to be a key component of our legislative agenda for the coming year. We also have some recent experience with the Regional Performance Incentive Program that I think would inform this effort. And given the significant challenges that our member municipalities are facing to recruit the next generation of employees and staff for a whole variety of positions, I think the issue becomes even all the more important. And I also believe it would be essential to involve some of our representatives from labor in this work, because I think at the end of the day, if we're really serious about removing the statutory barriers that remain, that impede shared services to a certain extent in our state, we're really going to need a strong labor management coalition to move that forward and eliminate those barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Other comments?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Just, I think when it comes to our workforce, that was something that was actually just discussed from USDOT, and how this is the lack of essential skills for, let's say, infrastructure is something that we need to address. And once again, they mentioned the value of working with labor and our unions to ensure that we have that workforce of the future for all the skills and trades that we need to be successful. I think some other areas where ACIR can be very helpful is our solid waste issues in the state that the towns are dealing with, and working with DEPON. I think the ACIR could be helpful on that. And then going back to transportation, and I mentioned earlier in my comments, having the state work better with the cities and towns and COGS on non-federal match. The idea of an infrastructure bank similar to some other states. I was talking to one of an undersecretary here about states as diverse as Arkansas and Kentucky, who have worked to find state resources to assist their their counties and their cities and their MPOs to get that non-federal match. I know that the Connecticut Association of COGS is going to be talking to some legislators about that concept. But here's a great way for the municipalities and the state to coordinate in cooperation with our federal government. And how do we take advantage of the federal funding that has been appropriated in IJA, but it's ours to compete for. And working together as a team, I think we can be quite successful. And also, they mentioned that some of that federal money can be used for job training, and that our state DOTs have money that can be used for the job training that we need for those infrastructure projects. So that was an interesting thing I learned today.
Thank you, Sam. And I think, you know, what was just said and what Matt outlined as well, those are issues that were not on the top of the list in 2020 and, you know, would, you know, need to be there along, I think, with housing. So, you know, like with everything that they evolve and this document can evolve and there's still, I think the majority of the things on there are still very valid. So I guess without objection, we'll add that to our list of items. The next deals with some ACIR reform legislation that I actually had drafted for consideration, and I just I realized that there's many things within that draft that need to be discussed, refined, etc. But I think one area that I believe there may be consensus on is the need to move to get the membership from different organizations, like take the Council of Small Towns, which was brought up, that to enable them to appoint their person and the person or representatives be placed on this body directly without going through the governor's office for review. And so I think that item alone, along with the prospect of allowing designated members to authorize a proxy or a designee to serve in their place when they cannot attend, if we could just move those two changes forward, we could strengthen this body and not have these significant delays from the naming of someone from a CCM or a cost to when they can actually be seated, and save the other elements of this for further discussion within ACIR. I don't know what anyone's thoughts are on that, but I'll throw that out there for consideration. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like that idea, you know, the notion of moving forward a relatively small set of more modest proposals for consideration in the upcoming session, while we take some time to review the broader changes that you've suggested, at least in a draft form here.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yes, I have my hand raised, John, Betsy Guerra.
Yep.
We would be happy to support that. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's critical to this process and critical to developing good policy through ACER that we have a full complement of our representatives appointed.
Great, thank you. Okay. Other ideas, topics that folks would like us to explore during 2024?
John.
Roy has hand raised.
Yeah, Bruce, I have my hand raised, Troy Rakuya. I just want to reinforce the fact that the proxy, I think, is very important, especially with the track record on quorums. So I think if we push that through, proxy or designee, we could actually get a lot more done next year. So I think that should be the priority. And I'm definitely not opposed to the other suggestion with the COGS making their own appointment.
Great, thank you. Other ideas for focus for 24? Anyone? Christine? Well, it'll be an easy year.
There was quite a bit of discussion about building out partnerships, and I don't know if you want to tackle that within the next.
I think that would be very appropriate. So we'll add that to the list. And Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend in the relatively near future, we revisit this concept of where we stand with the work plan for the coming year. And I know that's what we're reviewing now. I think updating the 2020 report on shared services will take some time and attention. Reviewing a larger piece of legislation for potentially the 2025 timeframe will also, I think, take some time and effort. I would also support the notion of inviting guest speakers and maybe even members of the General Assembly from Planning Development and other relevant committees just to come and chat with us about their priorities and just for some Q&A as well.
I think those are good suggestions. And I think too that like today, although there's not a lot of us here at the LOB, having the meetings in a hybrid form, but based here where lawmakers have an opportunity to sit in with us makes a lot of sense as well. And there is a lot of those elements are within that draft legislation that I put forward. And again, we still have time before the session begins, and there may be other elements that folks deem appropriate to move forward within that, and we can talk about that at our January meeting. Okay. So we have looking at this, we do have a December 19th meeting, and I guess that's for the subcommittee, right?
That is right.
So perhaps we'll use that as the date for the meeting to discuss the MPO study for the subcommittee, if that will work out for folks as a target. And then our next meeting, full meeting, is January 5th coming up, and we don't have a quorum, correct? Okay, so we can't set our meeting dates for next year, and so that's unfortunate, but we'll have to work around that. Other business or comments that folks want to bring forward?
John, just a quick question for you. You can't see the raised hand, right, from the folks out here?
No.
So maybe we could work out a procedure where Martin or Bruce could have an iPad where they could be watching for raised hands, and then that would facilitate that and make it easier for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Jim, we're monitoring. We have that, we can see the raised hands from here.
Okay, great. Very good. Thanks, Martin.
Okay. Well, if there's no other business, although we're not officially in a meeting because we don't have a quorum, but I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I mean,
motion to adjourn.
I can't even do that motion. So I'll just declare the meeting over, and thank you all for coming, and we'll see some of you at the subcommittee meeting, and others enjoy the holiday season.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.